Welcome to Career and Leadership Real Talk, the no-nonsense guide for ambitious managers who want to have more impact and progress their career. I'm Pamela Langan, a job search coach and expert CV writer specialising in helping frustrated professionals land the jobs and pay rises they know they deserve.
And I'm Jackie Jagger, a leadership and mindset coach specialising in helping newly promoted and new to role leaders to avoid the dickhead trap and lead with confidence. Between us, we've helped hundreds of leaders and managers to find new roles, take ownership of their careers, and handle the challenges that job searches and leadership responsibility inevitably bring. And now we're joining forces to share with you what we know has worked for our clients. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode. We are very excited today because it is, for the first time, a guest expert joining us. And our topic is curiosity and using that as a career skill. And we are joined by the rather fabulous Laura Chamberlain, who is an award-winning marketer, career strategist and coach. She's a professor of marketing at the University of Warwick. And because that's not enough, she also, alongside that, manages to run Think, Talk, Thrive, which is a professional development and career strategy agency. So Laura first met Pam and I on the same day that the two of us first met in person. So we've known you from the start of this podcast, and the conversations that we've had have been fabulous. So I'm hoping that the listeners will get the value of all that you can bring to it. So Laura, do you want to give the listeners a bit more of a flavour and an insight into who you are and what you're passionate about?
Yes, hello. And thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm an avid listener, so the pressure's on because your podcast episodes are epic. And I am just honoured to be your first guest. So feel really pleased to be here and to talk about one of my favourite topics too. So thank you for having me. I guess that the way I would describe myself is not a normal academic for sure. And helping people is the golden thread that runs through everything that I do. So when I work in an education capacity at university, I'm obviously helping people with their self and professional development alongside their education. And that naturally has spanned into thinking about how I can help people with their careers. And I work with everybody from early talent right through to C-suite. And one of the pillars of my business is skill development. And so I would say borderline obsessed about thinking about skills and their development and different ways in which we can help people with that, which is why it's a privilege to be here talking to you today.
Thank you. And curiosity is an interesting one because I would hazard a guess that probably for most listeners, they've perhaps never really thought about curiosity as a skill. And certainly when I was employed in my career, I didn't really think of it that way. And I don't know, Pam, whether you felt the same. Was that something you ever felt that you needed to develop? Was it something that you already had? How did you perceive it when you were employed?
I think I always perceived it as something that I needed to do more of. Like I always wanted to be more curious, but I think as I progressed through my career, more and more leaders and managers that I worked for told me to stop being curious, to get back in my box, to mind my own business. It was always understanding where that fine line was, where I was able to be curious or where I was potentially stepping on other people's toes.
And that's something that we'll come back to because I would, again, hazard a guess that there will be listeners who will definitely relate to that. And yes, I have also been guilty of overstepping and being told to get back in my box. So yeah, it will be interesting to delve into that. Before we get to that though, Laura, talk to us about how you define curiosity. So what is it and how can it help people in their career?
I'm going to preface this with the fact that it's a working definition because this is very much a work in progress. I define curiosity as being inquisitive with purpose. I think it's really interesting to think about curiosity as a skill, not just as an innate characteristic. So some people will say, I'm a naturally curious person. And of course, we all have different levels of curiosity, and we can see that with children particularly. thinking about our innate characteristics, but it is also something that we can develop in a professional context as a skill. And so being inquisitive is one part of it, but this idea of purpose is so important. So it's about thinking about what curiosity can do for you. And that's something that we're going to explore. And also thinking about this idea of what do you want to achieve through being curious. So there's lots of different ways in which we can think about what curiosity can do. So it can help solve organizational dilemmas. It can help us innovate, so create innovation, think about different ways of working. It can improve business outcomes. And also it's about thinking about other people. So curiosity can actually help to build stronger relationships and forge deeper connection and engagement with our colleagues. And that's really important for thinking about culture, of course. So I think there's lots of different ways in which we can think about what curiosity can do in an organizational and professional context. And there's lots of exciting opportunities, I think, to think about how we can develop our curiosity. I think as well, it'd be really interesting to hear what curiosity has done for you in a positive sense, because you started off talking about how perhaps you've been told to get in your lane a little bit with this idea of curiosity. But Jackie and Pam, how has curiosity helped your career?
I think for me, curiosity really helped fast track my career because it allowed me to really get under the skin of how the business worked and how I could make the most impact within the roles that I was in. Because I had that understanding, that allowed me to look for the quick wins, and it also helped from a leadership perspective. So I really feel like, although I probably wouldn't have said that was me being curious, I would have said that was me figuring out what all the facts were and finding out all of the key information. I wouldn't necessarily have labeled it as being curious, but essentially that is what it is.
And I, just picking up on your definition, would build. So the point of being inquisitive, but with purpose, for me, one of the questions that I always wanted the answer to was, what's the practical application for what I'm learning? So I've always been quite driven to learn. I enjoy learning. I enjoy gaining knowledge, going on courses, learning new things. But there was always for me that element of, how is this applicable? What can I do with it? What's the practical application of it? And then more recently, for me in coaching, that element of inquisitiveness and curiosity is a huge part of my own professional development in my coaching capacity, because it's about what are the drivers behind, what are the factors that are going into this situation, and asking questions that help my clients to open up their thinking has come from, I think, having probably inadvertently developed that skill. So definitely recognize some of that natural curiosity from when I was younger, but it wasn't necessarily an intentional skill development for me. But I think a lot of it came from that perspective of always wanting to have practical application to what I was learning.
And all three of us coach. And so it's really interesting to think about how we use curiosity in our coaching practice, but also how we try to develop curiosity about the people that we're coaching, how we can help them develop the curiosity about themselves. And that, I think, can be really eye-opening through that coaching process as well. But just circling back round to the point you made about learning, Jackie, I think that it's such an interesting pillar that curiosity sits underneath. And when I was looking at skills frameworks, of which there are many, I have done a piece of analysis of the most prominent skills frameworks. And it was really interesting that curiosity is not often listed as a skill in skills frameworks. It's starting to appear in skills lists that are published by organizations. But curiosity actually sits underneath things like learning, innovation, creativity. And I think given the fact that we are moving into a very dominant narrative around skills-based hiring, I think it's a really timely opportunity to think about curiosity and how we develop it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a perfect opportunity almost right now to start helping people to understand how being more curious can help them progress in their careers. But I've got a question for you. What do you think stops people from being more curious?
Such an interesting one. I think there's a couple of things. I think age, in many ways, as we grow older, we become less curious and more accepting of things around us. And I think we can find ourselves in environments or conditions that don't nurture curiosity. And that's not necessarily that they are specifically created so that they don't nurture curiosity, but actually there isn't an active consideration of how to create what I call curiosity conditions. But I think, Pam, just circling back round to what you said about how you'd experienced this in the workplace, I think that's a really interesting point in terms of how other people can almost dampen your curiosity. And it can feel, if you're not necessarily conscious of the fact that you want to be curious, so being inquisitive with purpose, you don't necessarily think of a way to react against that idea that somebody's trying to tell you to stay in your lane, if that makes sense. And because quite often in that circumstance, you want to fit in or you want to do a good job, and somebody, or possibly more senior to you, is telling you that you shouldn't be curious about this or in this particular way, you go along with it because that's what you're being told to do. And I don't know if that resonates with the experience that you had.
Yeah, it really does. And I think being in leadership roles from an early age, like almost straight from university, and wanting to throw myself in and understand everything about how the business works, because my ultimate goal was to set up my own business. At that point, I didn't know what it was. So for me, being curious meant that I could understand how businesses work, so that when I was in the position to set up my own business, I knew exactly how it all worked from start to finish, whether it's a big business or a smaller business. And for me, I was quite lucky in the fact that I stayed curious, but I've seen a lot of other people have that almost knocked out of them because it wasn't the thing to do. It wasn't acceptable to start looking at and investigating what other people do in their departments and looking at the business overall. It was very much about that is your job role and you stick to it. But because I had that wider goal at the time, I really did stay curious because I didn't really care what they thought because I wasn't staying there, and I always knew that. But for others that are very much in that place where it's, I don't want to create a reputation for myself. I don't want to be seen to look like I'm not following the rules. It can be quite difficult when somebody says, keep your thoughts to yourself, stop looking into things, stop being curious, essentially. And that can be really hard for people, I think, especially early career as well, when you're just starting off and you're learning about how it all works. If somebody is unwilling to let you be curious, it can almost clip your wings at that point and set the scene for the future.
And just to pick up on that as well and think about what you were describing about the environment, Laura, and how the environment sometimes can not build that skill. One of the things I see in my work with leaders is the focus on doing rather than on thinking. And people have got meeting after meeting. They've got so many items on their to-do list. The number of times that Pam and I have talked about the value of taking time, when we did the episode on how to show you can think strategically, a big part of that was take yourself out of that environment that is stopping you from being able to operate in that way. And I feel like there's a real parallel with curiosity, that when you're in doing mode and you're trying to plow through a to-do list, you're just trying to get to the end, aren't you? And that's not an environment, even if more generally innovation and creativity and all of these things that curiosity can feed, even if those things are prized, actually finding the time and space and the environment to do it alongside a busy day job is not easy, is it?
100%. And there's a real interesting idea around curiosity and time, because in some ways you can't rush curiosity. And that sounds like a really strange thing to say, but it does need time and space and also environment, a curiosity condition, as it were, in order to for curiosity to develop. So there's also an element of psychological safety around that as well, in terms of the environment, and thinking about what that starts to look like. And the time and space that you can give to developing curiosity can be formal, but it can also be informal. There's things that we can do that are routine. So we can look at how perhaps we build in time to feed our curiosity. And I'm sure we're going to talk about different ways in which we can do that. But then there's also the idea of it being opportunistic. So needing to, when you have an idea, how do you build on that rather than just putting it to one side and forgetting about it? And there's lots of different things that we can do to help feed our curiosity and to create curious environments. It's not just limited to education spaces. And there are lots of different ways in which we can look at that.
So share with us then some of your thoughts around, if people are listening in and recognizing that potentially for them, developing curiosity could be a benefit, and they want to perhaps avoid that trap of being told not to be too curious, but they want to gain the benefits that they can get from developing the skill. Where do people start with that?
I think the best place to start is to think about the idea of purpose. So it's not just about being inquisitive, it's about the purpose. So thinking about what curiosity can do for you. So perhaps looking at the idea of being curious through different lenses. So do you want curiosity to help you be more creative? Do you want curiosity to help you find problems that need solving? Or it could be, I'm a marketer, to understand your customers better. It could be about looking at curiosity to help you figure out alternative solutions. But once you find the purpose to your curiosity, it helps you to have some parameters around thinking about where you're going to find your curiosity inspiration, which is part of your curiosity conditions. And it will also help you to see an effect that being curious has. So it's not about being curious for curiosity's sake. Being conscious about curiosity, I guess, is a nice way to think about it. And so that for me would be the starting point, is what do you actually want curiosity to help you to do? And then it's about thinking about these curiosity conditions. So what is it that sparks your imagination? What is it that gives you inspiration? What are the resources that you can use? So that can be things like traditional things like books, podcasts, but also it can be looking at things like developing friendships that are based on curiosity. And Jackie and I often will bounce around ideas together on lots of different topics and really enjoy those conversations because we really spark off each other and we learn from one another and we spark off each other's curiosity. So it can also be about helping other people to be curious and sharing your curiosity as well. More widely, then, that can also be used as building a culture of curiosity within your team or within an organization.
I love that. And just picking up on that point that you've made a few times about the purpose, and going back to Pam, what you shared of when you were in that situation and told not to be so curious, but actually you had that career plan that you wanted to start your own business at some point. So for you, all of what you were wanting to learn and understand was all of that bedrock that had that purpose in mind. And so I think that's a really interesting one for people who are ambitious to think about, what are the ways that curiosity could help you and where could that go? But similarly, Laura, you describing, so I would say for you and I, a lot of what we bounce and go back and forth with, we call fizzy brain. It's the stuff that is sparking ideas for ideas' sake. It's the stuff of enjoying the process of being curious and seeing where it leads without being attached to. So there's not, I guess in that case, the purpose is different. The purpose is the enjoyment of sparking ideas as opposed to the business outcome. And yet so much learning has come from those conversations, so many different ideas. So yeah, I find that really interesting. The thought of purpose as not necessarily being the outcome.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot to be said for sharing curiosity with other people, and it can be a really enjoyable process. Some people might say it's like a curiosity partner. or somebody that you ask questions of. And there is a lot there around the idea of it being a very trusted and safe space. When I'm teaching at university, I always say that the only stupid question is one that remains unasked. But in the same context, it's being able to throw out ideas and say, is this crazy or is this, and not be judged. I think that's so important. We're going back around to this idea about having a purpose to your curiosity. You can create curiosity practices or habits. So I would actually say that our sparking of ideas has almost become a little bit of a habit. It's fairly regular that we voice note each other with ideas, or we share things that we thought out of, or here's a question, and just throw things open. So it's a conversation. It's not something that's necessarily like on Tuesday at 10 a.m. I will have a conversation with Jackie about something. So it isn't routinized in that sense, but it is very regular. And that's what it's bite-sized, so it makes it manageable, and it actually feeds, I think, both of us in slightly different ways. But you can also be a little bit more systemized around it and look for curiosity gaps. So almost making a list of topics or skills or areas related to your professional role that you maybe don't know much about. And then you can actively read or learn using different mediums around that particular topic. You can also use mentors to explore your curiosity gaps. And there's lots of different practical things that you can do in the workplace, like joining cross-functional teams or volunteering for things you wouldn't normally do. Being reflective as well around what you're doing and why you're doing it can also be a great way to nurture your curiosity.
Yeah, that is really interesting. And I think probably looking at it from another angle as well is, how do you think curiosity impacts leadership?
Oh, that's a big question. I think there are lots of different ways. I think it's really interesting to think about how using curiosity as a skill can drive things in a slightly different way. I think for leaders particularly, there is something about modeling behavior that promotes questioning and exploration, which leads to innovation. So I think there's something about showing that you are curious as well as a leader, and what that can drive, fostering that environment of continuous learning and innovation. On a personal level for leaders as well, I think curiosity can be hugely beneficial when navigating complexity and figuring out solutions, understanding problems perhaps in different ways, but also finding opportunities. And often with leadership, that's something that we have to do, is to find opportunities that perhaps aren't obvious in order to drive growth or to do things differently or to find solutions. And thinking about the skills that are important for leaders, we can look at how curiosity actually can underpin lots of those skills. So when I talked about the skills frameworks, it's the same when we think about the skills that are really important for leaders. So curiosity can underpin critical thinking, collaboration, empathy, trust, all of those things that we know are hugely important in leadership. That wasn't an exhaustive list, by the way. There are probably more. So I think for me, the most important one is when you can see a leader modeling that behavior. That's so powerful.
Yeah. And would you also say that leaders should also encourage their teams to be curious too?
Absolutely. I would love to see a culture of curiosity springing up along many different teams. And I think there's lots of things that can be done, both formal and informal, to help teams develop curiosity as part of their culture. So it's ingrained in what they do. And it can be around very specific things that they're tackling at that point in time, or challenges that they're facing, or it can be more general. And it doesn't always have to be specifically around work-related tasks. You can foster curiosity in lots of different ways around each other and team members, finding out more about each other, and thinking about inspiration from unexpected places. So sharing perhaps things that you're interested in and what that makes you think about, and how that maybe can be related to work. So it can be something that's very work focused, but it can also be something that's a team building as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm always a huge advocate of being extra curious in the first 90 days when you start a new role, because people are always really keen, aren't they, to just get stuck in. And we've covered this on a previous episode, but people always just want to get stuck in straight away. They want to start getting emails through. They want to just get on with the job. But I always feel like those first 90 days, that is like prime time, isn't it? To be curious, to find out as much as you can about team members, key stakeholders, and the business generally.
I love that point. And yeah, I think often people will start off relatively curious, but maybe that curiosity doesn't stay for as long as it could, or doesn't give as much benefit as it could. And just listening to you describe, Laura, about the context of leadership specifically, one of the things that I think I naturally did more so as a leader was I would use curiosity to think about what's the actual problem that needs to be solved. And there's a lot of onus on leaders. And potentially the obvious thing you might think about is using curiosity to solve the problem. But actually, the problem can be relatively straightforward to solve if you've really defined the problem. And I think for me, that was an application as a leader where I was hopefully in my career able to role model that sometimes, was that element of, okay, let's not worry about the solution. Let's really get under the skin of what is the real problem, what is causing the problem, why and how often does the problem come up, what's behind it, when doesn't it come up, what solutions have other people used for that same problem. And actually then you don't overcomplicate the solution because you've applied more curiosity to defining the problem.
There's a design thinking tool called the 5 whys. So when you look at a problem, ask yourself why, and then why 5 more times. That's what it says on the tin. But it's a really powerful way of really interrogating a problem and getting, like you say, getting under the skin of a problem and really understanding what's going on. And I think for me, that's really exciting because it adds such depth to then formulating the solution. And I think there's a lot of benefit to that. As you were talking then, Jackie, it also made me think, those team building days or away days that everybody dreads. I think that there would be something really cool where you could look at using curiosity as a theme for building those team days, whether it's about thinking about skill development or how you work as a team. I think that's a really nice frame for thinking about how to design something to help either understand problems or think about your teamwork as well.
And just picking up on what you were saying there, the 5 whys and that kind of design thinking piece, I guess brought me back round to what you were saying at the start of how very often curiosity is quashed out of us. We start off naturally curious as children, but then perhaps the environment and the way that we experience the world quashes some of that out of us. So age being a factor where it declines. And that childlike curiosity, they don't need anyone to teach them at all for 5 whys, do they? Like any small child will ask you why until they get to the nth degree. So it, brings back round full circle to that childlike version of curiosity that we can actually learn a hell of a lot from.
But also to your previous point about it needing some space, time to think. And I think there is a lot there we often are presented with problems or problems arise and it's like problem, fix it. And it can be a bit like firefighting, or it's part of the conveyor belt of the working day. But actually taking a problem and thinking, hang on a minute, how can we explore this? How can we interrogate this problem in a bit more detail rather than just rushing to fix it and find a solution? Obviously, there are some times when an immediate fix is required, but sometimes finding that problem that you can actually take a step back on and take some time to really interrogate it and think about it is hugely valuable.
Love it. I could literally, I'm sure Pam is the same, spend hours and hours talking through on this. But in terms of some of the key takeaways then, if people are listening to this episode, what would be the things that you would want them to remember and take away and apply for themselves in their career?
Firstly, curiosity is a skill. So you can develop your own curiosity. And I would encourage everybody to find ways to cultivate curiosity yourself and also with other people. There's such value in having those curious conversations. I think as well, I would encourage people to experiment with different ways of developing your curiosity. It doesn't have to be like a burden on your to-do list. No, item number 8, I must be curious today. That's never going to work. I think as well, being conscious about your curiosity and understanding what it can do for you and really thinking about where you can have being inquisitive with purpose is hugely important. So identifying curious opportunities and also looking at the impact of your curiosity on what you do. So can you start to see how curiosity is helping you and being mindful of that? I think if people can start to talk about curiosity as a skill and then the impact that their curiosity is having, that will become hugely powerful.
And I just would love to add that definition of curiosity in there, because I think that, I know you've said it's only a working definition, but that for me, being inquisitive with purpose is a really helpful way for people to frame what curiosity is and to start to then apply that in those ways that you've described. Thank you so much for joining us. We could have spent so long discussing this topic. There's so many different angles, and I'm sure we will invite you back again in the future to further that discussion. In the meantime, where can people get in touch with you?
So you're welcome to contact me on LinkedIn is probably the best place to find me at the moment. And I'd also just like to say, if anybody is interested in finding out more about curiosity or being part of perhaps a curious community, I am looking for expressions of interest of people who might want to join up to something. It's very much a work in progress at the moment, so it is only expressions of interest at this stage. But if you think that this is something you'd like to explore and develop and it's something that really resonates with you, then please do drop me a note on LinkedIn and I'd love to hear from you.
Perfect. Thank you again so much for joining us. As ever, if you have enjoyed this episode, then please do rate and review it. If there is someone that you think would benefit, then please do share it with them. And we will be back with another episode next week. Exciting news from us. If you're an ambitious leader or manager earning 50k or more and you're ready to take your career to the next level, we have an opportunity for you. Introducing Catalyst Career Club, your secret weapon for unlocking career success. As a member, you'll get access to monthly live training sessions, exclusive job opportunities, and the ability to get personalised advice from us on your toughest career challenges.
We've helped thousands of driven leaders like you secure significant pay rises, land dream roles, and thrive in their careers. And now we want to support you in achieving your most ambitious career goals too. Membership is just $6.99 per month with no contract or tie-in. And as a special bonus for being our podcast listeners, you can use the code podcast at checkout to get your first month for just £1. Head over to pamelalangan.com/Catalyst Career Club to sign up now, and we'll see you inside.